on a large region. In the case of Afghanistan, an agreement between Kabul and another nation, even as far as the United States, can have a lasting impact on the other nations in South Asia, the Middle East, and Central Asia. Or to highlight the most recent, the Doha Agreement's impact on the region today. Given his years of diplomatic experience, I'm hopeful that Ambassador Jawad can not only discuss how the current war in Ukraine is affecting international diplomacy, but also about how the interests of the nations he represented in Afghanistan can impact the nation itself. It's really important for everyone to stay quiet. Thank you. Of course, the United States and the UK are on one side of the global political landscape and Russia is on the other. But all three have had a great interest in Afghanistan for decades. So what can a nation like Afghanistan, which from the kingdom to the communists to the republic and now back to the Emirates, has been caught between these political poles, do to try and tip the balance in his favor? Reflecting in our neighborhood, ties between Iran and Afghanistan are complicated, especially given Iran's adversarial relationship with the United States. During the past 2 decades, Iran faced repeated accusations of both direct and indirect support of the Taliban, which at the time was an armed opposition. At the same time, Iran also expressed outright support to the Western-backed Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, which was largely supported by its longtime enemies in Washington. However, today, the dynamics have shifted, and the question is, how will Iran engage with the current government in Afghanistan now that its foe is no longer on Afghan soil? We have Dr. Muhammad Ali Bahmani Tajad, a researcher from the Islamic Republic of Iran, to discuss this. Afghanistan's other direct neighbor, Pakistan, also has a history of rocky relations with different Afghan governments. In the 7 decades it has existed, Pakistan's relationship with Afghanistan have largely been seen as through a negative prism. While it will require considerable effort to end deep-seated animosity, both countries share close ethnic, linguistic, religious, and economic ties. Long-standing Afghan migration to the territories that now compose Pakistan makes them an integral part of Pakistani society. To elaborate on Pakistan's current and future engagement with Afghanistan, we have Afra Saeed Khattak, former Pakistan Senator of the Kora Division of Herat Province. Khattak Saeed was one of the leading members of Parliament Committee on Constitutional Reforms and one of the architects of the 18th Constitution amendments for promoting human rights and federal democracy. We have many other critical regional players, but I will just highlight one more from Central Asia, Kazakhstan. I invite Ambassador Omertai Diplomat, former Ambassador of Kazakhstan to Afghanistan, to begin the discussion on the necessity of the restoration of economic stability in Afghanistan. The specific question I would like to pose to Ambassador is, like Afghanistan, Kazakhstan is rich in natural resources. The former Islamic Republic failed to capitalize on Afghanistan's wealth in terms of natural resources, in part due to the ongoing conflict. Now that the conflict has largely ended, what advice would you give to the Islamic Emirates in terms on how to deal with its wealth, minerals, and gemstones without falling prey to predatory behaviors and ensure that as much profits from natural resources remain in the nation as possible?
Без вмешательства в этот критически важный процесс со стороны внешних сил и наблюдателей. Наряду с этим посредническую роль в этом вопросе могли бы сыграть такие авторитетные региональные межгосударственные объединения, как Шанхайская организация сотрудничества и совещания по взаимодействию и мерам доверия в Азии, в которых участвует Афганистан. Однако очевидно, что этой стране потребуется дальнейшая поддержка международного сообщества при центральной роли ООН. Региональные страны, какими является Казахстан, играют определенную роль в налаживании развития партнерских отношений с нынешним режимом в Афганистане в различных областях двустороннего и многостороннего сотрудничества. Со своей стороны, Погромче?
Да, да.
Или ближе?
Да, поближе.
Давайте. Со своей стороны Казахстан не закрыл свое дипломатическое представительство в Кабуле. Посольство наше действует. Посольство и Генеральное консульство Афганистана в Астане и Алматы продолжают свою работу, хотя в значительно усеченном виде. Афганская тематика обсуждается на проводимых в Астане и Алматы различного рода международных форумах и встречах в рамках ООН, Евросоюза, ОБСЕ, СНДА, ШОС, СНГ, ОДКБ и так далее. Данная проблематика была включена в повестку дня деятельности Казахстана в качестве непостоянного члена Совета Безопасности 2017-2018 годы. Нами был организован рабочий визит делегаций членов Совета Безопасности ООН в Кабул в январе 2018 года для ознакомления на месте с обстановкой в Афганистане. В контексте вопроса обеспечения продовольственной безопасности Казахстан выступает за продолжение усилий по оказанию гуманитарной помощи афганскому народу. Следует отметить, что штаб-квартира Исламской организации продовольственной безопасности находится в городе Астане, одним из реципиентов которой является Афганистан. В июне этого года проведен форум высокого уровня данной организации в Алмате. Наша страна продолжает предоставлять продукты питания нуждающимся слоям населения Афганистана. В сокращенном виде действует десятилетняя программа образовательная по бесплатному обучению афганской молодежи в казахстанских вузах. Нами было подготовлено более 1000 молодых. По нашей инициативе, при финансовой поддержке Евросоюза и организаторской роли ООН функционирует отдельная программа подготовки специалистов из числа афганских девушек и женщин сейчас. Некоторые университеты намерены продолжить. Бизнес сообщества Казахстана и Афганистана, имеющие долголетние деловые связи, заинтересованы в двухстороннем сотрудничестве. Товарооборот между нашими странами превышал в свое время 500 миллионов, и еще есть большой потенциал. Хочу отметить очень важную для нашего региона инициативу Казахстана о создании регионального центра ООН по целям устойчивого развития в Центральной Азии и Афганистане со штаб-квартирой в Алматы. Об этом говорил на общих дебатах на 77-й Генеральной Ассамблее ООН в сентябре сего года президент Казахстана Касым-Жомарт Токаев. Условия для реализации данного проекта у принимающей стороны имеются. Казахстан удобно расположен для Афганистана в географическом и логистическом плане. Через нашу страну проходят кратчайшие железнодорожные, автомобильные, воздушные, транспортные маршруты, по которым Афганистан может доставлять гуманитарные и коммерческие грузы, налаживать и поддерживать двустороннюю многостороннюю торговлю. Наряду с этим обстановка в Афганистане продолжает негативно отражаться на общем состоянии региональной безопасности, сохраняются угрозы распространения международного терроризма, наркобизнеса, религиозного экстремизма, роста нелегальной миграции. Однако в условиях отсутствия международного признания талибского правительства представляется целесообразным продолжение практического взаимодействия с Афганистаном в интересах гуманитарной, в торгово-экономических сферах. В заключение хочу пожелать братскому народу Афганистана, имеющего большие людские и природные ресурсы, занимающего важное географическое положение, в первую очередь мира и стабильности. Спасибо.
I guess the key point that Ambassador mentioned is that it's important to interact with the current structure, if I got the translation correct. We're going to move to our second panelist, Ambassador Jawad. The current government in Afghanistan still has yet to be recognized by any nation, but representatives from Western and regional governments, as well as international bodies like the United Nations, continue to meet with officials of the Islamic Emirates in Kabul and abroad. How long can this situation last? And what point do you see other countries either acknowledging or turning their backs on the Emirates? From your perspective, why did Afghanistan fail in its diplomacy with Pakistan? We are looking for specifics, so lessons learned. What role can Pakistan play in post-Taliban setup? And lastly, we have had political players and activists blame Pakistan for the current status of Afghanistan. Is that fair?
Wow, very easy questions. Thank you very much, Mariam. I'm از جناب دکتر سپانتا و اسکندر نهایت سپاسگزار هستم که مرا دعوت کردن و بسیار I'm very honored to be part of this distinguished panelist here, especially my long-standing and dear friend Senator Khattak. It's a pleasure being here. So I leave the academic and historic discussions aside, and I'll be concise and frank on my discussions. I think the important questions why the international community is engaging with Taliban has been raised many times. I think the objective of engaging Taliban by the international community is threefold. First, to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe in Afghanistan, which is unfortunately unfolding. And second is by extending a hand of friendship to Taliban, the aim is to change their behavior. And speaking of the hand, also by keeping the feet of the Taliban on fire, making them deliver on the promises that they made on human rights, on counterterrorism, on inclusive government during the failed Doha process. But none of these objectives are accomplished. And despite the hard work of many diplomats involved, no one really has, except for one ambassador, no one has really met with Mullah Haibatullah. Not only met, but also the decision-making mechanism of Kandahar is very opaque. And this is also creating a problem on the side of the Taliban, because the expectation on the Taliban side was that they are the legitimate government, they see their rights to gain legitimacy in foreign assistance as their God-given rights, not international community or Afghan-given rights. That's what they think, that God is giving that right. And that's why in their interaction with the diplomats here, they're not really for horse trading. They take a strong, firm stand on principal issues. Then, of course, and I'll be brief, of course, in addition to these three common objectives of international community, UN, and other interlocutor, every country has a specific also agenda in dealing with Taliban. I served in Russia. My last assignment was in Russia. Enjoyed very much actually being in that beautiful city of Moscow. But Russia started interacting with Taliban before the Doha process. And in the nexus of this interaction was the seeing United States leave the region, leave Afghanistan. That was the important nexus. And then also Moscow actually implemented the so-called Moscow format, where included actually the Central Asian countries and other. In here, the objective of the Moscow was a regional objective, saying on one hand, the Taliban are a threat for the region, for Central Asia, but don't worry, they are under my thumb. So they are under our control. So that was also a regional approach to the problem in Afghanistan. On the other side, Taliban were expecting that after Pakistan, Russia will be the first country to recognize them, to bankroll their operation, and this didn't happen, of course. This didn't happen, and after and most of my Russian colleagues were telling me that the intelligence information the Taliban were sharing with the Russians were not credible. So, and then the bombing of their embassy in Kabul further actually expanded the rift between Moscow and Taliban. And you probably have seen the statements of Mr. Peskov and the statement of President Putin that now put Taliban and extremism is a threat to Central Asia together. Not Taliban is a mean of actually reducing the threat of terrorism, but they put them in the same bucket, basically. And in this context, Uzbekistan tried to kind of preempt Moscow by having even more closer relation with Taliban, by basically implying to Moscow, like, we really don't need you on this relationship, we can do it ourselves. So they have very close relation with Taliban, a lot more interaction than other countries. Just to name these few major countries shortly, in the United States, of course, it's my understanding that there's not very clear policy direction at the very top. President Biden is personally not engaged on this policy, but there are many actually hardworking American diplomats and charities and other organizations that are trying to do their utmost for the situation in Afghanistan. And most of the efforts are based on preventing a collapse. Preventing a collapse of Afghanistan and preventing a human disaster in the country, because it's, on one hand, they don't want to see a human disaster, but on the other hand, a completely failed state in Afghanistan will have implication in domestic politics of the United States, especially with the changes that we are seeing in Congress with Republicans gaining more momentum and the upcoming presidential elections. Iran, actually another important country, to name a few. Their support of Taliban was mostly on anti-US nexus to begin with. I was speaking actually with some Iranian colleagues during the Doha process, and I told them, like, why you guys are actually hanging out with Taliban? You have nothing in common with them. Their idea was that we are trying to remove them from Pakistan and Saudi monopoly. So again, it's a regional agenda is pursued on this, and that continue. Even Pakistan, actually, which is always blamed for bringing back Taliban into power and other, they are not getting everything that they are ordering to Taliban. So coming to the point that how they are engaging, what they are getting out of it, looks like no one is getting much out of the engagement so far. Turkey engagement has more regional context, so I'm not going to go into the detail of that, but I hope that Turkey pursues that a weaker Russia after Ukraine will give more playing ground actually for Turkey in the region, including Central Asia. So, and then Qatar is uneasy with their investment on Kandahari Taliban. United Arab Emirates is getting close to another faction of Taliban just to make up for what they failed in their competition with Qatar. But anyhow, my point is that most of the interactions of the international community with Taliban is tactical and transactional. And on the last part of your questions about the recognition of the Emirates, I don't think that's on the table by any of their interlocutors. So I'll end here on the question of Pakistan. If you give me time, I'll discuss it, but it's up to you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come right back around. It's really interesting to hear the ambassador's remarks on the relations, the international relations one has with the Taliban. It's unrecognized, but there is recognition to their interaction. It's quite odd. Dr. Bahmani Hajar, Iran has joined other...
بکنم از دستاندرکاران این همایش مؤسسه مطالعات استراتژیک افغانستان و خدمت شما عرض بکنم. البته من کاملا به صورت شخصی حضور پیدا کردم، میشنو نمایندگی از ایران نه رسمی نه غیر رسمی حتی ندارم. عنوان مطلبی که میخوام صحبت کنم ایران و افغانستان تأمین منافع متقابل در گروه امنیت پایدار است. به این معنا که من فکر میکنم امنیت پایدار اگر در این منطقه و به خصوص به طور خاص در افغانستان تأمین بشه، منافع متقابل ایران و افغانستان هم تأمین خواهد شد. ایران نگرانی‌های امنیتی دیرپایی نسبت به افغانستان داره. از بعد از عهدنامه 1857 پاریس که در واقع اون پیوندهای سیاسی ایران و افغانستان، وحدت سیاسی که بین ایران و افغانستان بود، از اون دوره کاملا قطع شد. نگرانی ایران نسبت به افغانستان نگرانی امنیتی بود. من در اسناد تاریخی که مربوط به اون مقطع هست و خوندم ملاحظه کردم که حتی در همون دوره، یعنی حدود 170 سال پیش، نگرانی ایران این بود که نکنه افغانستان منبعی بشه برای تولید ناامنی و تهدید برای داخل مرزهای ایران. به خاطر همین حتی سالها تلاش شد که یک منطقه حائل بین کابل و خراسان ایجاد بشه. ایران از اینکه یک حکومت خودمختاری در هرات باشه به رهبری سلطان احمد خان حاکم وقت هرات در اون دوره حمایت میکرد و میگفت من نمیخوام با دوست محمد خان و حکومت کابل همسایه باشم. مایل بود یک حکومتی در هرات باشه که از ایران مستقل باشه، از کابل هم مستقل باشه و منطقه حائل باشه بین ایران و در واقع حکومت کابل. و نگرانیش این بود که یک ائتلاف ضد ایرانی ایجاد بشه به وسیله حالا افغان‌ها، ترکمن‌ها، بقیه و داخل امنیت خراسان رو تهدید بکنه. همینطور نگران بود که کشتاری از شیعیان افغانستان صورت بگیره و این مسئله باعث مهاجرت به داخل ایران بشه. اتفاقی که سالها بعد، یعنی حدود 10-20 سال بعد هم افتاد، یعنی در دوره امیر عبدالرحمن خان خب کشتاری از شیعیان افغانستان صورت گرفت و باعث شد در همون مقطع هم صدها هزار نفر از شیعیان افغانستان به ایران کوچ کنند که به عنوان نام خانوادگی خاوری اکنون هم در ایران زندگی میکنند. همین نگرانی امنیتی بعدها در دوره پهلوی هم بود به شکل دیگه. نگرانی ایران از نفوذ شوروی و کمونیست‌ها بود در افغانستان. ایران در جنگ سرد در کنار آمریکا بود، در کنار غرب بود و نگرانی داشت که مبادا شوروی بشه، افغانستان بشه مرکزی برای در واقع نفوذ شوروی و ترویج کمونیسم در منطقه. در خاطرات علم وزیر دربار محمد رضا شاه هست که علم به شاه انتقاد میکنه به محمد رضا شاه پهلوی و میگه تو در مورد مسئله هیرمند یا آبهای مرزی ایران و افغانستان داری سیاست امتیاز میدی به افغانستان. میگه مشکلی نداره، من فقط نگران هستم که شوروی در افغانستان نفوذ پیدا نکنه. به خاطر همین تلاش خواهم داشت که مانع نفوذ شوروی بشم در افغانستان، چون نگران هستم اگر شوروی ها در افغانستان بیان، کمونیست ها بیان در افغانستان نقش داشته که از موفق ترین پروژه های اقتصادی دوران جمهوریت فکر کنم جاده هرات دو قارون بود که ایران نقش ایفا کرد. اما در دوره دولت آقای غنی یه مقدار حساسیت علیه ایران ایجاد شد، به خصوص با پیمان استراتژیک آمریکا و افغانستان نگرانی در ایران زیاد شد. پایگاه‌های خب نظامی آمریکا در دوره کرزی هم بودن، ولی در دوره در واقع آقای غنی با این پیمان استراتژیک ایران احساس کرد اینها به صورت دوامدار خواهند موند در افغانستان و سلطه امنیتی آمریکا در افغانستان شاید یه جوری طولانی بشه. بحث مهاجرین بود که خب این مهاجرین برنگشتن، این امید وجود داشت دوره آقای کرزی که مهاجرین به تدریج برگردن، ولی مهاجرین برنگشتن و هر مقطع هم یک تنش‌هایی برای در واقع موضوع مهاجرین ایجاد میشد در دوره آقای غنی و یه تحرکاتی هم از طرف داعش و برخی از گروه‌های انشعابی طالبان بود، مثل آقای ملا نیازی که دولت ایران فکر میکرد اینها پشت این تحرکات خود دولت کابل ممکنه باشه. و بحث فیرمند هم که نه تنها حل نشد بلکه به عنوان مسئله سیاسی آمد و یه شعارهایی از طرف دولت افغانستان مطرح شد به عنوان آب در برابر نفت و اینها که به نظرم به نگرانی‌های ایران اضافه کرد. شاید این نگاه وجود داشت که بعد از در واقع بازگشت طالبان به قدرت خب هم آمریکا خارج بشه از افغانستان، هم یک امنیتی ایجاد بشه و دولت فراگیر نه به عنوان دموکراسی بلکه به عنوان حداقل مشارکت دادن نخبگان اقوام مختلف باعث بشه تا حدی امنیت در افغانستان ایجاد بشه. اما یک سال گذشته نشون داده که این امنیت در افغانستان ایجاد نشده، حتی مشارکت ظاهری نخبگان اقوام هم در افغانستان تأمین نشده. دو مورد مثال واضح مولوی عالم مخدوم بود در فاریاب و مولوی محمد مهدی مجاهد در بلخاب که حتی اینها هم تحمل نشدند و دولت فراگیر ایجاد نشده. عدم ایجاد دولت فراگیر باعث شده مسئله مهاجرین حل نشه. تعداد مهاجرین در یک سال گذشته در ایران شاید 2 برابر شده. بنابراین میتونم بگم الان هم در واقع دولت فراگیری اگر ایجاد بشه و امنیت پایدار در افغانستان فراهم بشه تأمین منافع پایدار برای ایران میکنه. اون انرژی که از اقوام بعد از کودتای کمونیستی 7 سور ایجاد شده، آزاد شده، اون انرژی به نحویه که با یک حکومت تک قومی، تک گروهی امکان پذیر نیست دیگه و امنیت پایدار در افغانستان، حکومت پایدار در افغانستان. ببخشید خیلی بحث داشتم ولی مدیریت زمان رو گویا نشد.
Has been much more reserved on that matter. What role do you think his government will take its relation with the Taliban? Do they seem to have any sort of plan on how they will handle the current situation in Afghanistan? And what do they see Pakistan's role? My second question is, this morning Islamabad sent a high-level delegation to Kabul to meet with the Islamic Emirate. The delegation was led by Hena Rabbani Kar, the current State Minister for Foreign Affairs. What signal do you think Islamabad is trying to send to the Taliban by having the delegation be led by a two-time female minister, while in the current Taliban government there are no high-ranking female officials at all? What do you think they will discuss?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank my dear friends who organize a Herat Security Dialogue every year. This year, of course, it could not be. I think I'll continue what my esteemed friend, Ambassador Jawad said. You see, Taliban is not a bolt from the blue. It's not a new phenomenon. I believe it's continuation of the jihadi project of 1980s. The same religious seminaries, 50,000 religious seminaries in Pakistan, brainwashing Afghan refugees, and turning Mahajirs into Mujahids. It has been a continuous process. Factories are running. I mean, they're busy in production. So there's nothing new about that. And I don't think Taliban are there to create an inclusive government, etc. Taliban is a demolition squad let loose on Afghanistan to demolish it bit by bit, limb by limb, brick by brick, just to turn it into an appendage of the neighboring countries, particularly Pakistani Minister of State Hena Rabbani is a very competent minister, and really I am a fan of her function. But I don't think she is there to find a solution. If she can find a solution, she don't have that mandate. It's the other connections that really guide Taliban. She's there just to. I mean, Pakistan will have some brownie points. She's there. She's trying to nudge Taliban apparently for the looks, for the optics. She's nudging Taliban, girls' education, etc. She will say, make some personalizes, but I don't think it's going to change anything. Unless Pakistani policy is not changed, unless Pakistan befriends entire Afghanistan, not Taliban, unless Pakistan recognizes Afghanistan as an independent country, as it. I mean, that is the important thing. So I am not going to prolong, but I just want to say that we are looking at a new conflict in our region. I believe it's a new stage of the great game. I believe US, UK, and China and Russia, they are entering into a new conflict, and unfortunately this time round again, our area region is going to be the battleground, to be the center of political buskashi, unfortunately, for which we will have to pay the price. So I believe Russia and China and Iran wanted US forces out, but US is out and US is not out because the horizontal strikes will make sure a UN presence. The only, terrorists are back in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda, ETIM, Turkish Islamic Party. The only new thing is Daesh. And it's a very dangerous new thing. And I don't think any non-state actor is really non-state actor. There's always a state actor behind the non-state actor. And I think it's the Daesh is going to play. I mean, in Pakistan, I see on daily basis, in 1980s, books were published for Mujahideen. In 90s, books were published for Taliban. Now books are published for Daesh. Huge literature is being produced. Is it a coincidence? How is it possible? In Pashto, Persian, Urdu languages, Daesh is producing, and it's going to be a dangerous force. So I'll come to solutions because the time is very tough to wrap up everything in this span of time. But I believe that the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan should get priority over everything else. because millions of Afghans have been displaced. And if the borders are opened, I think all the majority of the Afghans will go out because they don't want to live under Taliban. The Taliban is a very sort of repressive militia. It has a unique distinction of a militia which is ruling the country without a constitution, and its who are designated terrorists by countries, their bounties over their head as terrorists. And nobody is talking about that, nobody is taking notice of that. So I believe we should think of transition beyond Taliban. I'm not supporting war. I think the political resistance, Afghan women are leading this struggle against Taliban, like our brave Iranian sisters are doing in their own country. So I think they should be supported, Afghan women should be supported, Afghan civil society should be supported, and we should sort of see to it that there's a democratic alternative to Taliban's regime, which is neither legitimate internally, nor legitimate internationally. It can't survive. I don't see any future for Taliban. They can't create even Taliban-inclusive government, let alone Afghan-inclusive government. I think that's beyond them. Secondly, that we should think of having the economy of management instead of economy of mismanagement, this war economy. This war economy is perpetuating this war, and unless it is addressed, we can't think of peace. And I also suggest that we should have international mechanism, some UN-sponsored mechanism for supporting transitions in Afghanistan and supporting Afghans, helping Afghans to overcome this humanitarian crisis, particularly Afghan refugees all over the world. They don't have any state protection. They're dying, they're drowning in waters, they're dying from hunger to other countries. I think there should be a special mechanism to address this crisis, and also to help Afghans in their struggle against Taliban's militia. And I believe, as Pakistani, I can say that in our country, when democracy is restored, I don't think our political parties support this Afghan policy. Yes, I don't think Pakistani major political parties are supporting this. When we will have democracy in Pakistan, there will be peace in Pakistan. So peace in Afghanistan and democracy in Pakistan are two sides of the same coin. They are interconnected, and Pakistani Democrats express their solidarity with Afghans in their achievement for human rights and their struggle for achieving democracy and civil society. I thank you very much.
How do you see the engagement of the civil society in this political process? And how do you see the engagement and more interaction of the civil society in between the regional country in this political process? Thank you.
I think it's very important for the regional countries to work together. Despite their differences, they should look for the points of convergence, because if they don't unite for stabilizing Afghanistan, for helping Afghans in overcoming this humanitarian crisis and creating a legitimate government, all these countries will suffer. For example, in Pakistan, we have Taliban coming from the different line, Central Asia, all these 5 republics of Central Asia. So I think it is in their best interest to get together. You see, this Herat Security Dialogue is very important. They should listen to what is being said here, and they should also convene their own meetings. I'm really surprised. Normally, there are meetings, mostly it is national security advisors. It is security meeting. Afghanistan is always looked at from security prisms, not humanitarian, not political, not democratic. So I think it's high time to look at Afghanistan from political, humanitarian, and it is the best interest of all the countries in the region around Afghanistan.
if there are any other female colleagues that have a question, and then I will go to our male colleagues. Go ahead, Sara.
I have a question. I'm so sorry. I will ask a lot of questions for three of you. Ambassador, national community, and international community, especially US and European Union, they have two kinds of approach toward the issues of Afghanistan. From a very artistic perspective, I am like sharing my own point of view. One is a very emotional approach, which they share through their social medias. Okay, we are shocked, we are sad, we are so sorry, we didn't know that. Oh, Taliban are going to be good people, we believe that they are going to change and something. This is they share with people of Afghanistan, usually in daily basis. But there is a very secretive and hidden game which is going on and they never ever share with us. Even with people of Afghanistan, even with the leaders of Afghanistan, and we know that. The thing is that the international community, that we need that they somehow listen to us and to help us to make this inclusive government. They don't believe in the young generation of Afghanistan. Okay, they removed us. They are so happy that they evacuated us, okay, but they removed us. The very bright, promising minds and talented of Afghanistan, they removed from the public life of Afghanistan, and they are somewhere in US, in UK, and in Europe, and waiting for changing their life. So please, tell me, how we finally convince the international community that Afghan people, especially the young generation of Afghanistan, are not anymore naive. We are not anymore stupid. We know about their games. And there is a time that they also share with us that secretive meetings. Okay, can you please just, as ambassador, as a person that you have experience, to know them more, to give some suggestion about Iran. My question is, the biggest enemy was America. Sorry my accent because I'm learning Italian, okay? Your biggest enemy was America. Your biggest enemy was Israel. Your biggest enemy was Saudi Arabia. But we know clearly that the Taliban are negotiating, interacting, and they have relationship with these three countries. But tell me please, what is the game behind the Iranian policy with the Taliban? Even they are not Shia majority in Afghanistan. Even they are destroying our culture and our language, which is Farsi. Okay, what do you think? About the Pakistan, my question is, whatever situation is about Afghanistan, whatever advising the US especially and the international community especially, they want to know about Afghanistan or to decide about Afghanistan, they go through the Pakistani channel. They never communicate with us directly. Even Doha deal wasn't communicated with us directly. What do you think? Pakistan is this. I know I'm not in the position. There are many leaders that they know deeper and profoundly the issue of Pakistan. But I, as a young generation of Afghanistan, I, as a person that I spent most of my life in Afghanistan for developing my country, I, as a person who loves truly my country, what is the game behind the Pakistan? Pakistan doesn't know my country. Pakistan doesn't know our issues. But why the international community, specifically the America, they are always negotiating our issue with the Pakistan? Thank you.
A round of applause to our fabulous...
Be one unified plan, and then the international community will support. The responsibility is mutual. The international diplomacy does not work based on benevolence. It's based on interacting on equal basis. We are not equal, but we have to convince as Afghans, as a new generation of Afghans, that a pluralistic, peaceful, and prosperous Afghanistan is to the best benefit of the United States, Europe, Russia, Pakistan, and everyone else. We have to work on that. We know what we know, most of us know what we don't want. We don't want a tyranny and terror like the Taliban regime. It's time to work on saying that what do we want and put this forward instead of waiting for the signals from other foreign capitals. So just briefly on that issue. On the issue of Iran, yeah, I alluded in my remarks that part of the Iran behavior is driven by their rivalry with the Gulf state, with the fact, and that's, my time is over? Okay, no. And that's a fact. We cannot change this. We cannot change this by pleading or others. Historically, we were able, as part of the monarchy, as part of the Islamic Republic and other, to stay away from the rivalries of Iran with the United States and with the Gulf countries. I was ambassador for a long time in Washington. My main job was to keep actually Afghanistan-Iran relation decoupled from Afghanistan-US relation, because that would have caused more trouble for us and for the Americans. So can we do this? Can we decouple some of these rivalries and present actually, and again, once again, that peaceful, prosperous, and pluralistic Afghanistan is to the best benefit of Iran and other neighbors. Thank you.
کمی متفاوت بدونیم. در دوره کرزی ایران سعی کرد با این روند جدید کاملا همکاری کنه، ولی احساس کرد هیچ در واقع مابعضایی براش نداشت. مهاجرین همچنان بودن، از تعداد مهاجرا کم نشد و به خصوص در دوره غنی این منجر به تنش‌های مداوم هم میشد. شما میبینید هر چند ماه یک بار یک تنشی حول مسئله مهاجرین بود در روابط ایران و افغانستان. از اون طرف هم روند قدرت گرفتن طالبان مستقل بود از سیاستی که ایران داشته باشه در افغانستان. طالبان داشت قدرت میگرفت و برمیگشت به قدرت. بنابراین ایران خودش رو با یه واقعیت موجود روبرو دید. طالبانی که داره قدرت میگیره و برمیگرده و حکومتی که داره رو به زواله و داره از بین میره، و از اون طرف این حکومت هم شاخه زیتون خوبی به سمت ایران در واقع تعارف نمی‌کرد. هر روز شاهد تنش آفرینی های از سمت این حکومت هم بودیم. آقای فرض کنید شاه حسین مرتضوی که مشاور مطبوعاتی رئیس جمهور بود، رئیس جمهور غنی بود، تقریبا هر 10 روز یه بار یه توییتی علیه ایران میزد. بنابراین چرا در واقع ایران بیاد باز هم از اون دولت سابق همچنان حمایت کنه؟ نمیخوام توجیه کنم، دارم فقط توصیف میکنم، هیچ همدردی و همراهی با این سیاست ندارم. ولی زمان تموم شد. به هر حال من فکر میکنم ولی الان در این موقعیت ما خوبه ببینیم که در افغانستان همونطور که شما گفتید باید ساختاری باشه که با مردم افغانستان تا حدی منطبق باشه. طالبان بخشی از واقعیت افغانستانه، همه واقعیت افغانستان نیست. بخشی از واقعیت افغانستان هم شما هستید. بخشی از واقعیت افغانستان هم اون جامعه متکثر قومی هست. افغانستانی میتونه در برگیرنده در واقع یک دولت فراگیر و همه شمول باشه که تمام این واقعیت ها رو نمایندگی کنه، نه فقط بخشی از اون.
Pakistan to change its behavior. Now, if this is the type of experts that United States is producing nowadays, no wonder they're not getting Afghanistan, Ukraine, Pakistan right. Changing behavior of a state like Pakistan by bribing them, that is something that I've never heard of. Pakistan has its policy. Michael Flynn, once upon a time, he and myself were on the same program, and he very frankly, you know, like the soldiers have frankly said, both the countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, they follow their own interest. That's true. That's the interest of Pakistan. Get rid of the neighborhood of all foreign military presence, and that has continued for 40 years. Because the debris falls on us, and most importantly, Afghanistan, whenever it is in a position to take its own decisions, it has always defended our western border whenever we had problems with the east. Now that was just one point. The second was even more interesting, frankly, Jawad. Pressurizing Taliban, holding their feet to fought. We'll see what happens later on. Thank you.
Before I call out my Afghan colleagues, I would like to ask if our Indian counterpart would like to
join that point, except to remark on the confidence with which Mr. Durrani speaks about Afghanistan, which probably says a lot for itself. But let me actually pose a question to Afraziat Saab, who I respect very greatly, and I totally agree with everything that he said, which is, and this is a little bit of crystal ball gazing, can we see a day when perhaps the Afghan Taliban and the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban, actually join hands across the border? And what kind of ripple effects is that likely to have across the region, including specifically Afghanistan?
So Pakistan was with the Western camp. But I think Pakistan, it is not in the best interest of Pakistan. Pakistan has suffered a lot because of this policy. This is a suicidal policy. Talibanization is as bad for Pakistan as it is bad for Afghanistan. And it can be bad for other countries also. But unfortunately, we have get bogged down in this policy for a very long time. And unfortunately, war has also dividends for some people, interest for some people. There is war industry, and there are war contractors. They benefit, unfortunately, by war in every country, and Pakistan is no exception. So that is a real problem. But as I earlier said, Pakistani political parties are in favor of relation with Afghanistan as a neighboring country, as an independent, free neighboring countries, and democracy and peace in Afghanistan is a must for democracy and peace in Pakistan. Otherwise, I mean, as Mr. Halbrook in 2009 had said, he had talked about FPAC. FPAC is really a very dangerous term, and collapse of state in FPAC started from Afghanistan can spread. It has got a cancerous spreading, and I think let's beware, let's be cautious, let's be foresighted, let's watch, and let's stop this FPACing, this collapse of state, this anarchy, and this militancy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that integral conversation.
One of the comments that, has brought out very beautifully the predicament that those who are well-wishers of Afghanistan face is that everything so far, when you look at the last few decades, every attempt of a government has failed. And I think one of our speakers said this as well. And it is something that we have to, in the region, understand why, A, they have failed. Secondly, what the impact of the interest and the interference of other countries has been in Afghanistan. Those that prop up one regime, those that support another regime, are all equally to blame when those regimes do fail. And I do think that we need to talk about the inclusive political system, but I also think we need to understand that the inclusive, as Mr. Khatak said, that the Taliban is not interested in an inclusive system. How have we reached this point where we are just discussing the idea of the Taliban now including other people into a form of government? And my final point is that we saw 6 years of the Taliban from 1996 to 2001. It is interesting that in today's discussion, we seem to have the idea that they will last forever, even though they didn't last forever the last time.
We talk about incredible natural resources, but they were never developed. So the will to sustain a strong state is not there. We have to face this fact. That's one. But still, with the limited wealth that they had during the monarchy of King Zahir Shah or the Republic of Dawood Khan, we had a functioning state. We had a functioning democratic system, democracy. We had a functioning school system. I'm a product of them. I went to Lycée Français de Kabul, the French Lycée of Kabul. So it did exist. The country was not a black hole. So, but what caused actually the trouble in Afghanistan was the changing geopolitics by the revolution in Iran, and then Soviet Union actually expanding further, and that's not necessarily actually an internal development inside Afghanistan. And same thing actually, the war in terror and it was other elements actually who did some evil things in New York, and then it brought actually the United States to Afghanistan. I think to think that at the end of the day the failure was Afghan based, I only agree to the extent saying yes, the wealth of actually sustaining states in Afghanistan was limited. But now actually we have developed much better human capital in Afghanistan. And the connectivity of Afghanistan, if there is peace, and the opportunities that exist in the region between Central Asia and Afghanistan and South Asia will provide actually adequate wealth to sustain a state in Afghanistan if there is peace. Thank you.
I'm sorry for most of you who feel offended. If you feel the need to speak aggressively to me, then what expectations do we have of the de facto government of the Taliban? One.
Mariam,
Secondly,
please.
I will go according to the values. I give the women the place first, our regional colleagues as they are guests, and now
سوال مطرح است. من اصولا دو تا مشکل اساسی رو در ارتباط کشورهای خارجی و همسایه در مسئله افغانستان می‌بینیم. و این سبب شده که ما از ناحیه کشورهای خارجی و همسایه‌ها بسیار ضربه ببینیم. یکی اختلافات این کشورهاست و این ثابت شده بر اینکه کشورهای منطقه و کشورهای و جامعه جهانی با همدیگر در مسئله افغانستان هرگز متحد نبودند. نمونه اخیرش همین مسئله مسکو بود. ما در اونجا شاهد بودیم بر اینکه چی شد. این اختلافات تا زمانی که ادامه داشته باشند این به ضرر مردم افغانستان و این اختلافات یک واقعیت است. نکته دومی که وجود داره این مسئله است که کشورهای همسایه و اینا در مسائل افغانستان همیشه دخالت کردن، یعنی بی‌طرف نبودن. الان مهاجرین، میلیون ها مهاجری که الان در دنیا پراکنده شده و مخصوصا در ایران و پاکستان، این دودی است که در چشم اینها رسیده و این نتیجه همین سیاست های چی بگیم، البته تعبیر شاید مداخله گرانه بگیم یا هر چی بگیم اینا هست و حکومت فعلی که طالبان الان هست اینم اگر ما یک بررسی بکنیم اینم محصول در همین مسئله هم کشورهای منطقه و اینا نقش خیلی مؤثری داشتن. درست است که این یک مسئله غیر قابل انکار است که حتی پدیده طالبان هم در اثر مداخلات از اینا میتونه تا یک حدی چشونه و اسناد و مدارک زیادی وجود داره. در ارتباط با مسائل داخلی در افغانستان اصولا ما حکومت‌های خوب اصولا نداشتیم. حکومت‌های خودکامه و دیکتاتور بود و مخصوصا همونطور که نماینده محترم ایران اشاره کردن که منظورش از شیعیان همون هزارها هستن و 130 سال پیش اسناد و مدارک و کتاب‌هایی که هست و ما هم زیاد اسناد داریم، حکومت افغانستان که باز هم اونجا اگر نگاه کنیم کشورهای خارجی هم با همون حکومت ظالم همراه بودن. چیزی در حدود بر اساس روایت سراج تواریخ چیزی در حدود 62% از قوم هزاره، مردم هزاره در افغانستان آواره شدن، قتل عام شدن. در حال حاضر هم متاسفانه حکومتی که در افغانستان آمدن و این ما ریشش را همطور که در خارج هم میبینیم، یعنی این ما بریده از سیاست های شما امکان داره این توجیه کنید، رد کنید و یه بریده از سیاست های شما نیست. شما اینا را حمایت هم کردین، به اینا پول هم دادین، اطلاعات هم دادین، هر نوع همکاری رو کردین به خاطر همون اختلافات و رقابت هایی که بین خود کشورهای منطقه و دنیا داشتن. در حال حاضر حکومتی روی کار آمده که همه گرفتار از شدن. البته بحث اینجا نظام سیاسی فراگیر بود که در این مسئله پنلیست های ما زیاد توجه نکردن، همه در حاشیه این بحث رفتن. فعلا زنان ما به شدت سرکوب میشه و 20 سال دستاورده که ما در افغانستان داشتیم یا کلا از بین میرن و خلاصه یک وضعیت بسیار اسفباری الان ما داریم. در شرایط فعلی یک گروه آمده در اونجا حاکم شده که هیچ در یک چارچوب نظام بین المللی قابل تعریف نیست. ما نمیدونیم این چی رقم تعریف بکنیم، این چی هست. ما تمام میکنیم دیگه، بیشتر از این عرض نمیکنیم. منظورم که اون چی که در افغانستان در سطح داخلی مطرح هست اینم بریده از سیاست کشورهای منطقه و دنیا نیست. یعنی اینا نمیتونه خود از اتفاقات و از کشتارهای و بیرحمی‌هایی که در افغانستان است اینا نمیتونه خود جدا کنه و پاکیزه نگه داره. اختلافات کشورهای منطقه دنیا هم باعث صدمه زدن به افغانستان شدن، بین خودشان اختلاف دارن و مداخله اینها هم سبب مشکلات ما در افغانستان شدن. تشکر از شما.
Positive comments. You always been a good friend of Afghanistan. About the democracy in Pakistan, how long should we wait for a proper democracy to be strong in Pakistan and military establishment go back to their barracks and stations and leave the politics to the political elites? My second question is from Mr. Qajari. I'll ask it first in Farsi and then I'll ask it in English too. ما معلومات موثق داریم که بیت رهبری کارشناسان خودشان را ببخشید مسنجر سهیل هستم، صاحب امتیاز روزنامه 8 صبح. ما معلومات موثق داریم که دفتر بیت رهبری به قندهار کارشناسان خودشان را فرستادن تا برای امیر غایب هیبت الله دفتر و دیوان بسازن. شما در این مورد چی معلومات دارین؟ اگر لطف کنین برای ما توضیح بدین. And I have a comment, Mariam John. You have used Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan. I think we should not use that phrase, especially from this stage and especially in this city. Any prefix and suffix for the Taliban is unfair, and it's not. It's somehow is whitewashing Taliban. Okay. Unfortunately, there was a feeling, an understanding among our Western partners that the Taliban have changed, right? And now they are also coming to the understanding that no, Taliban is not changing. So only phrase that we should use for the Taliban is Taliban, okay? There is no other explanation or you know, any other suffix or prefix for the Taliban. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nobody is going to invest in Pakistan. Very serious problem. So I think this can be suicidal for Pakistan if Pakistan continues to do that. As I said, collapse of state in Afghanistan has very grave consequences for Pakistan. It can also lead to collapse of state in Pakistan. It's not a very simple or easy thing for Pakistan just to wait and see. So I think pressure is growing in Pakistan, and political parties are under severe pressure. Unfortunately, our political parties have their own limitations. I mean, most of the parties are led by elite, and then they are dynastic parties, dynasties. I mean, the dynastic interests. That's why status quo has prevailed for so long. But we have seen new movements rising when political parties can't handle the situation. For example, this PTM, this Pashtun Tahfuz movement that we saw recent 2-3 years, it emerged because the political party was not able to give voice to the demands of the people. So people found a new way. So I believe political parties, to avoid losing relevance, they will have to change their policies. And I think it will not be an indefinite or, let's say, decades of waiting. Because if we delay it, it will be as bad for Pakistan as it is for Afghanistan, and God forbid it can have the state collapse can also go to Pakistan if Pakistan doesn't go for radical reforms of the state and society.
4 تا موضوع مهمه که در ارتباط با امنیت ایرانه. یکی اینکه مهاجر نیاد به طرز گسترده، دیگری اینکه تهدید خارجی نباشه، یعنی کشور ثالثی از ناحیه افغانستان ایران رو تهدید نکنه، و دیگر تهدید تروریستی نباشه. مسئله آب هم به هر حال اختلاف هست. متاسفانه تو دوره جمهوریت این 4 مسئله هیچ کدوم حل نشده بود و باعث نگرانی شده بود برای ایران. مهاجرها همچنان بودند. تهدید خارجی با توجه به پیمان استراتژیک آمریکا افغانستان میشه گفتش که دوامدار بود، گرچه هیچگاه از خاک افغانستان اقدامی علیه ایران نشد. واقعیتش این را باید حق و انصاف رو بدیم، ولی به هر حال یه نگرانی بالقوه بود. حداقل تهدید تروریستی هم بود، داعش و میگم گروه‌های مثل ملا نیازی و اینا بود. مسئله آبم خیلی در واقع سیاسی شد، یعنی همه کشورها اختلافات با هم دارن، اصلا اشکالی نداره، این اختلاف وجود داره، ولی اینکه بیاد این رسانه‌ای بشه، خیلی ژورنالیستی بشه، رئیس جمهور کشور بیاد راجبش صحبت کنه در سخنرانی و اینا با یه حالتی که تهدیدآمیز باشه، این صورت خوشی نداره. این میتونست در کمیسیون‌های فنی در واقع مطرح بشه و حل و فصل بشه، افغانستان مواضع خودش رو داشته باشه، از منافع خودش دفاع بکنه، ایران هم همینطور، ولی نه اینکه اینقدر روی سطح بیاد، روی در واقع تبدیل بشه به یه ابزار سیاسی و تبلیغاتی. حالا طالبان به هر حال حکومتی اونجا حاکم شده. شاید یک تصوراتی وجود داره که اینا میتونن یه امنیتی ایجاد کنن، در نتیجه اون امنیت مهاجر نیاد، تهدید خارجی نباشه، تهدید تروریستی نباشه و شاید همکاری. من هیچ معلومات خاصی در مورد اون موضوعی که به طور خاص حضرت عالی اشاره کردید ندارم، ولی میگم شاید همکاری‌های بوده و هست و باشه. ولی به طور کلی در مورد فرمایش جناب ناطقی بود دیگه فرمودن، این رو هم عرض بکنم که اون چیزی که میتونه امنیت پایدار ایجاد کنه که ایران هم ازش منتفع بشه، یک دولت فراگیره در افغانستان. خوشبختانه وزارت خارجه ایران تو این 1 سال گذشته تاکید کرده که باید دولت فراگیر و همه شمول باشه. در چند نشستی هم که بوده اتفاقا ایران باز این تاکید داشته رو دولت همه شمول، دولت فراگیر، و باید دولت فراگیر تو افغانستان باشه که امنیت پایدار اینجا ایجاد بشه تو خود افغانستان و از این امنیت پایدار همسایگان منتفع بشن. حالا این دولت فراگیر چه ساختاریه؟ دوست عزیز و مورخ هم جناب عزمی بودن دیگه، در پلن قبلی اشاره کردن به ساختار سه‌دوزایی. خب اون ساختار سه‌دوزایی که اون امپراتوری نیست که وجود داشته باشه، الان ساختار محمدزایی از بین رفته. اون چیزی که دوران کمونیستی و مجاهدین و اینا هم بود نتیجه نداد. دوره جمهوریت هم اون ساختار دموکراسی که حالا یه مدل لبنانی بود، تاجیک‌های بخش داشته باشن، ازبک‌های بخش، هزاره‌ها و پشتون، اونم نتیجه نداد. به نظر یه ساختار غیر متمرکز در افغانستان که همه اقوام خودشون رو در اون ببینن، اون میتونه دولت فراگیر و باثبات و توسعه‌گرا رو در افغانستان ایجاد کنه، ساختار غیر متمرکز. و چنین ساختار غیر متمرکزی هم امنیت پایدار رو به وجود بیاره، هم همه مردم افغانستان از پشتونا در جنوب، از طرفدارای طالبان تا افرادی مثل خانم صحرا کریمی، زنان افغانستان، همه خودشون رو در این ساختار غیر متمرکز ببینن و در واقع منافع و خواسته هاشون تامین بشه.
For you to have a discussion with them, please give a round of applause to our panelists and most importantly to your moderator.